I just had this epiphany that, I never owned any of this stuff. It all owned me. And all I did was get bigger houses, build houses, do this, do that, so I could house all of my things that I had collected. And yet, when you come close to death, then you know that, none of this is real. You can't take any of it with you. The only thing you can take with you is what you feel, what's in your mind, what's in you. And so immediately I just had this epiphany. I wanted to get rid of everything I own.
Guy here. Welcome to my podcast. And my awesome guest today is Clint Ober. And boy, did I find this conversation fascinating. In a nutshell, Clint has gone on and become very successful. He's created the whole earthing and grounding movement. And I invited him on the podcast today to not only talk about those things, but to actually dive into his journey. He nearly died and he completely tipped his life upside down and sold everything. There was a very powerful quote in here where he said, "I realized everything I owned me." And I thought, wow, isn't that so true? Even though I love the exploration, this podcast of people's near-death experiences, people's spiritual transformations, and, channeling, there's all sorts of conversations I love to explore, but I feel it's really important that where's the rubber meets the road? How do we start to integrate our spiritual lessons in our daily life to allow us to live with more peace, more love, more freedom within ourselves and our hearts. And for me, that's extremely important. And of course, the work we teach with Live in Flow. Anyway, this is an incredible podcast. I'm always looking for the 1%ers, the things that can make a difference in our life. And I truly feel this is one of them to help us be more connected to ourselves and our hearts and our souls. So let me know what you think of this. If you're watching on YouTube, drop us a comment below. Really love hearing from you. Please let me know how you're going with the channel. And of course, I hope I meet you in person one day somewhere around the world in one of our events somewhere. Anyway, enjoy. It's a great one. Clint, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me on your show.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you're all about connecting people to the earth, and our retreats and workshops are actually called Reconnected. So we've definitely got a theme in common here.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So I'm going to start off the same question I ask everyone on the show. But let's say you bumped into a random stranger on the street, or you were at an intimate dinner party and a stranger sat next to you and they said, "What did you do for a living?" Or "What are you passionate about?" How would you answer that?
Well, I've spent the last 25 years grounding people to the earth, trying to get their shoes off so they can reconnect and understand that nature plays a big role in maintaining health, and especially the electrical stability of the immune system.
Yeah. And there's a lot in there when you start unpacking it, right?
Yep.
Do you feel it must be surely when you first started talking about this 25 years ago to the level of awareness and acceptance today must have shifted dramatically?
Well, it really has. In fact, last week, I think it was last week, there was a front page article in the Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about TikTok. And they were stating that earthing, or hashtag earthing and hashtag grounding, had received over 635 million views in the past short time on a couple of videos. So that's, half again as many people, 1.5 times as many people live in the United States or more. And 25 years ago when I started talking about earthing and trying to help people to understand it and started the research, nobody knew about it. Nobody could believe it because it's too simple. It's crazy. It's woo-woo. It's this, it's that, whatever. And it's now today, I don't think there's hardly anybody out there that hasn't heard about it. They're not sure what it is. But yeah, it's turned into a movement.
Wow. How does that make you feel, knowing that you fanned these flames of this movement? You know, if you hadn't stepped into this kind of passion of yours to what it is today.
Well, I've only done three things in my life. One, I was one of the original pioneers in the cable television industry. And I loved that industry because it made the world a smaller place on one hand, or a bigger place. If you live in a small town, Montana or somewhere like that, you get one or two TV stations. And then with cable, we ended up with, 500 now. But the objective of that was to let everybody get a better view on the world they live in. And so that was a mission and a passion. And so, and I really, and the internet is an extension of all of that. So now everybody can have their own channel. You have your own channel, and you can connect with the people that you're all on the same page. That's what it was all about. That's what our mission was. And so that was one of them. And the second one was, when I accidentally recognized that you can't have pain in a grounded body. The effects of grounding on the system. So it became a passion. I was 54 years old when I really kind of started to put it together. I'm now 80. So it's, but the more I got into it, the more I understand it, the more we began to do studies, it became very obvious that everybody is suffering from the disconnect from the earth, and everybody's bodies are on fire. But the word inflammation didn't come along until 19 years ago. But I've been working on this for like 25, 26 at that time. And so the more I got into it, the bigger it got. And it's really 99% female business. It's moms in their early 30s or thereabouts up to their 60s. They all develop some form of autoimmune related health disorder. It starts out with chronic anxiety, irritability, fatigue, then fibromyalgia, then lupus, then MS, then breast cancer, then cardiovascular, you name it. But everybody in that age group kind of suffers from an autoimmune disorder, meaning their immune systems are not functioning properly. Mm-hmm. But as I was able to tie this up and pull it all together, then you can't stop. You can't say, well, I figured it out. I'm on the way. I'm going to do something else. This is it's a educational movement. And so it's like television in the beginning, education. So my whole life has been about teaching, educating, finding things and opening things up, and education.
Yeah, it seems to come natural to you, finding your passion and getting it out there. That's for sure. I'm fascinated, before we get into everything earthing and everything you've discovered and the positivity on the bodies. I'm fascinated to get into a little bit of your story, because I know at one stage you were faced with your own mortality a little bit. And after going through that, you jumped in an RV for 4 years and traveled around the States. And I believe everyone listening to this at some level must have a fantasy about, you know what, I'm going to pack it all in tomorrow and just go. And was it that period of your life that led into the passion for earthing?
Well, yes and no. It didn't manifest immediately as grounding. I retired from the cable television industry when I was 50.
Okay.
And I did okay. About that time, I had a major health disorder where I had I ended up with an infection in my liver. And it was from a dental abscess. It was over the holidays in Denver, and I damn near died from it. But anyhow, I ended up 30 days after it started. I ended up in the emergency room at Swedish Medical Center in Denver, and they did an MRI or CAT scan, what I don't remember now, but they went in and they found what was wrong because the doctors hadn't been able to figure it out. And so my liver had this abscess, and it had infected the whole liver. So the next day they said we got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we know what it is because no one could figure it out. The bad news is I was young enough to get a new liver, but I probably didn't have time on a waiting list to get one. And so they said, you need to go home and get your act together, clean up your affairs because we don't know what's ahead. And so anyhow, about a week or 10 days later, a young surgeon from Swedish Medical Center called, or their office called and said they wanted to entertain doing some experimental surgery. And they went in and cut out, 4, 5, 6 of my liver, the big main.
Wow.
Took it out completely. And they didn't know back then how much of the liver they could take out and still survive. But anyhow, I did survive. It took me about a year. No, it took me 6 months to be able to walk a mile after the surgery. I had no energy. And then within 6 months, the liver had grown back to the full size that it was originally. It wasn't all the little recipient areas that it was, but it was the main function. The main liver grew back the same size as the original. So at 50 years old, I had a new liver, good energy, and ready to go. But when I recovered from that, and that was about the time I decided to retire anyway. And, but in going through that process, I lived on a mountaintop in Evergreen, Colorado, called Stanley Mountain, and had a 5,000 square foot A-frame 2-bedroom home. And I could see Vail and I could see Denver. But anyhow, I had a lot of art. I had a lot of personal things that I had acquired in my life. And one morning after the surgery, I woke up and I looked outdoors and everything was, more vibrant color than before. Like the blue was bluer, the green on the pine needles was greener. It was just more electrified. And I didn't know what that was, but then I started looking around the room and I recognized that, what would have happened if I died? Who would have taken care of all this stuff? And nobody would have known why I bought this piece of art or that piece of art or why I did anything other than I was, extravagant or something in collecting things, But anyhow, I just had this fear run through me because my life was about climbing the mountain like all men do, trying to knock out the competition, trying to get to the top and raise the flag. And anyhow, I had been successful, so I didn't worry about that too much. But anyhow, I just had this epiphany that, I never owned any of this stuff. It all owned me. And all I did was get bigger houses, build houses, do this, do that, so I could house all of my things that I had collected. And yet, when you meet or when you come close to death and you're not sure you're going to come out of a surgery, then that, none of this is real. You can't take any of it with you. The only thing you can take with you is what you feel, what's in your mind, what's in you. And so, immediately I just had this, epiphany. I wanted to get rid of everything I owned. And I literally did. What I didn't give away to my family, I donated to whoever, whatever. But I literally I bought a small RV and I loaded it up with 2.5 suitcases of personal belongings. And I got rid of everything else in my life. And it was a mountain of stuff. But anyhow,
how is that feeling doing that right then? Like, I just say it's hard to comprehend sometimes because we spend so much time accumulating, and
it's like a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air. You can I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to think about that. I don't have to worry about the neighbors. I don't have to worry about anything or anybody. The only thing I have to do is live with myself. And that's what I went through was when I recognized that I could die, then I thought, well, I wasn't very happy. I made a lot of money and things, but you can't take any of that with you. And so all of a sudden there was a horror. It's a feeling of horror when you recognize that you spent your whole life building this stuff, collecting it, and taking care of it. And when it's time to go, you go and it stays.
Yeah.
And so I said, I don't want that anymore. Next time I die, I want to be able to be happy with myself, be happy that I did something that was being a contributor rather than a consumer, or being somebody that was at least responsible for being here and doing something worthwhile. And so I packed up everything and I went on the road for 4 years in an RV. I spent most of my time in national RV parks, the big national ones, or some of the state parks that are really nice. And I had grown up in Montana, in the outer hinterlands. And so being alone was not an issue. I really enjoyed being alone. And, but anyhow, I just had to retune everything. And then about 4 years, I'd been running around the United States, and I was parked down at Key Largo, down on the Bayside. And one night, and I was standing there on the dock, and the manatee would always come up, want some fresh water, because they only drink fresh water. Live in the ocean, but drink fresh water. Strange. But anyhow, they come up and you water them a little bit. And then one night I was sitting there, everything became quiet. Had a beautiful sunset, no noise whatsoever, no people, nothing. And I had this, and the RV was parked within 3 or 4 feet of the dock. And so the water's right there. And so I, had this feeling come over me. I mean, the words came to mind, become an opposite charge. I knew I had to go do something. It said become an opposite charge. For me, that would be go poke them, go stir them up, like create, get them going, charge them up. It's like a cowboy. And then a few minutes later, I wrote down the second thing. It says status quo is the enemy. I had not a clue, but I wrote these things down because they came out of nowhere. And that night, I just had the feeling, it's time for me to go find something to do, get back to work, do something. So I loaded up everything a couple of days later, and I headed back west. I went to San Diego, and it was too busy for me, so I went to Tucson and didn't feel comfortable. So with being from Montana, I thought, well, I'll go up to Flagstaff, which is elevated with pine trees and snow, something I'm used to. But anyhow, so on my way up there that night, from got to about where Sedona is, or forget the name of the town, but there was a little RV sign going off to the left, and it said, RV. So I pulled in, and I ended up in Sedona, Arizona. Never been there, never heard of it, knew nothing about it. And it was dark that night. So I just pulled into the RV spot, and they let you park, and then in the morning you pay. And it was around 10 o'clock, and it was pitch dark. So anyhow, I woke up in the morning, opened the door, and looked outside, and I said, this is like living in a national park. I'm not going to leave here. Because you had all the red rocks and, the Oak Creek running through the middle of town. And then it was a tourist town also. And it had a whole lot of art galleries, and I'd always collected art, so I knew a lot about art. And so this is kind of just a nice place to be for me. Mm-hmm. And so as time went on, I started playing around in the art galleries a little bit and talking some of the gallery owners into letting me light their galleries, because normally you walk into an art gallery and you got 100 light bulbs and you can't see the art. So anyhow, I started lighting up some high-end art, and everybody fell in love with it. And then all the galleries, about 30 of them in town, and then some in Scottsdale and some in Tao and wherever, Taos. And so everybody wanted me to come and do special event lighting, and they didn't have any money. They didn't pay you anything to speak of. But so anyhow, I ended up starting a little company called Best of Show, and I was working with electrical again. So anyhow, one day I was trying to put in an order with a wholesale house down in Phoenix, and the computer kept glitching up. And I'd have to shut it down, bring it back up. This is in the middle 90s. And so I knew what was wrong. It was static electricity. So I went and found a piece of copper tape, 1-inch copper tape, taped it across the front of my desk, in front of the computer, connected it to an electrical ground. And then anytime I would go to touch my computer, I would touch the tape first and get rid of the static electricity on my body. Then I could go turn the computer up and start typing, and no problem, as long as, yeah. So a lot of people aren't aware of that, but if you live in dry climates, static electricity is a big problem. And back then, nothing was grounded. Everything was, the old Apples and the other PCs. Right. So anyhow, after I did that, got my order in, I went outdoors and sat on a bench, and up pulls a big tour bus. And this tour bus was full of it was a Japanese tour group. And so they all got off the bus marching one by one, and they're stopping to eat, I think. And I just looked at them, and they all had these big white Nike type tennis shoes on. And I don't know where it came from, but I just intuitively asked, I wonder if there's a consequence to humans no longer being naturally grounded. Because when I was a kid, we were always barefoot. The only time we wore shoes and they were leather. This was in the 50s. And then, along in 1960, we invented plastics. The first thing we did is put them on the soles of our sneakers, like the I don't remember what the plastic is, but anyhow, the foamy plastic. And I didn't know, but anyhow, that night I went home because I fixed that tape. I went home and I took a voltmeter and I was just measuring all of the electrical noise and the static electricity in my home. And I went upstairs into the bedroom, and the bedroom was the worst. And I thought, this is really strange. So I went back to the hardware store, got a roll of 3-inch wide metal duct tape, $10 or something. And I taped it across the bed on top of the sheet, taped it right to the sheet, took a wire, connected an alligator wire to it, threw it out the window, went out and connected it to a ground rod that I had driven into the earth, probably a big screwdriver. And I went back upstairs, and I had 2 wires going out, one for the meter, one for the tape. And so if I would touch the meter and touch the tape, then all the static would disappear. All of the EMF would disappear. So, because when you're not grounded, you're an antenna. Your human body's a body of salt water. It's an antenna, so it attracts static electricity and all this noise. And so anyhow, you touched the tape, and the voltage meter would go to 0. And the static meter. So I laid down that, and I just playing with it, trying to figure out how come I didn't know this, because I'd spent 30 years grounding communication systems in the cable industry. And I was really puzzled. And then, but the next thing I knew, it was morning. And again, I was like 54 years old. I was a cowboy. I had skied for 30 years. I had every kind of ache and pain in my body that anybody could have. So anyhow, normally I would have to take Advil or something to go to sleep. And in the morning, a lot of black coffee to get going because of the aches and pains, And so anyhow, I slept on a couple more nights, and the same thing. I went to bed. I almost went to sleep almost immediately. And then I grounded a couple of buddies that I had met in Sedona, because nobody sleeps. Hardly anybody in the United States or anywhere else sleeps because of, they live in a chronically elevated fight or flight state. And, but anyhow, I asked one of them, I went over and grounded their beds. A couple of days later, one guy comes back and he says, do you think this could have anything to do with my arthritis? Because my arthritis is going away. And I said, no, I think it's just sleep. And I left it at that. And then I recognized that all of my pain, chronic pain, had almost disappeared. And this is debilitating, oxidative hot pain. And so then I thought, well, this is crazy. So I went to the literature and tried to find something. Why does grounding the body reduce pain? Why does it promote sleep? Absolutely nothing in the literature. So I went down to Tucson, the University of Arizona. They didn't know anything. Had good visits and everything. And then I ended up saying, I'm going to go out to UCLA and get those guys to help me out because they know everything. Well, I went out there and connected with, I think it was the sleep lab group. And they sat down, they listened to me, and they looked at me and they said, you expect us to believe that somebody's going to stick a nail in the ground, tie a wire around it, and then tie it around somebody's toe, and they're going to sleep better? They said, get out of here. You're nuts. Go away. And so anyhow, we did end up carrying on a conversation. I knew nothing about biology at that time, and they knew absolutely nothing about the body electric. Even though everything in the body is electrical, every cell's electrical, the heart's electrical, thoughts, mind, everything, every muscle contraction, everything is electrical. But they deal in pills, potions, and whatever.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I didn't know what to think, but they said, you're going to have to go do a study and bring us back more evidence, more data. So I hired a couple of kids to help me and a nurse. And we went up to Ventura, and took us a while, but we grounded 60 people, 30 of them placebo, 30 of them with phony grounds. And the 30 that were grounded had the same experience I had. They slept better. Pain went away. Not only that, TMJ went away, and the ladies with PMS, the PM cramps, everything went away, and just a host of those kind of things. And I remember one girl looked at me and she said, well, this can't be a cure-all. I said, I don't think it's a cure-all, but I do think it's a cause-all. I think that because we're no longer naturally grounded, all of this stuff is happening to us. And then I went down and found an anesthesiologist to help me do a more quantified study where we measured cortisol every 4 hours for 24 hours, built a profile, grounded him for 30, 60 days, went back and did it again. And then we saw very clearly that everybody's cortisol is like spaghetti, the secretion profile. And then after they're grounded, they all synchronize into a nice band, but they comes highest at 4 a.m. and lowest at midnight. And so we learned two things. One, everything reduces inflammation, but there's also these rhythms, like at 4 a.m. cortisol spikes. Well, there's nothing in the environment. There's no light, there's no noise, there's nothing except the rhythms of the earth. And so we knew that some of the rhythms of the earth were cueing cortisol secretion profiles. So we knew further that we're intimately related to the earth. And not only that, common sense tells you very simple. You come from the earth. You eat the earth, you breathe, the air, the water, everything. And when you're all done, you go back to the earth. We're part of the earth of walking around. And we cut off our electrical connection with our mother.
Yeah. So is that, so you're saying then we're tapping into the circadian rhythm, like that rhythm, that natural rhythm is harmonizing us into that natural rhythm.
Right. Yeah. All the planets and everything were here first, then we come along and our bodies, develop within those rhythms, and those rhythms are cueing mechanisms, seasonal cueing mechanisms, daily mechanisms. All of these things that go on in the body. So we're a part of this big thing. And
when you discovered that time, the question that was jumping in for me, I didn't want to interrupt, was how was your health after all your surgery at that point? And then,
Oh, well, that's what I
did
said.
you notice?
I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. I had, you know, a big chunk of my liver taken out.
Yeah.
I've had back surgery. I've had, just all kinds of broken bones, this, that, whatever. So just chronic pain. Yeah, I was living in chronic pain. I was living on Advil and pain meds. And most people out there 50 years old, I mean, if they're working people, they're living with chronic pain and pain meds. But that all, here I am 80. I'm healthy as can be. I have a couple of pains that talk to me once in a while if I go ungrounded too long. One was a skiing where I twisted a knee one time and never did have the surgeries or anything. So I just babied it back because it was after I found grounding that I was able to manage that and get rid of it. But no, I'm 80 years old. I can still walk 5 miles. I can do it only in a grounded shoe. I can't do it in a normal shoe. And it's hard to find a path you can walk barefoot on that long. But I can get 5,000-10,000 steps in anytime I want. I have the energy to do it. I can breathe. I survived COVID. I survived everything because my immune system, we can get into it when you're ready on inflammation, what it is.
Yeah, we'll try and dumb it down for me and listeners, but yes, because I understand the importance of inflammation and the contributions to chronic disease.
Well, most all modern health disorders, that's like cancer, cardiovascular disease, lupus, MS, you name it, they are all inflammation-related health disorders. And the word inflammation is a misnomer. The word inflame means your body's on fire. I mean, you're inflamed, your body's inflamed. So that means it's being oxidized. That means radicals in the body are chewing up the body. So in order to figure this out, it took us, maybe close to 7-8 years.
Oh, wow.
And I ran into a doc by the name of Stephen Sinatra, who was a cardiologist back in Connecticut. And I met him at a convention and I told him what I was doing. He says, Clint, he said, if you're reducing pain, you need to be looking at inflammation. And I said, what's that? And to me, that would have meant, you twisted an ankle and swelled up or something. And he says, no, inflammation is different. Inflammation is like an immune disorder. Something's wrong with the immune system. And the immune system is not unwinding after an oxidative burst. And it's oxidizing. I'll go back and explain how we found it. Anyhow, one day we knew that grounding reduced pain. But when there was an article came out in 2004, Time magazine, front page, showed the body on fire and had the words inflammation. And in small print said, you don't have cancer, you don't have this, you don't have cardiovascular, you don't have that. What you have is chronic inflammation, and it manifests differently in different people based on your genetics and your lifestyle. And I thought, then I listened to and when they were talking about all this, I recognized that if what they're saying is true, inflammation is the problem that's promoting all of these chronic health disorders, then I know what's promoting inflammation, because when we ground people, inflammation at the speed of light instantly stops. And so now we had to find out what's that mechanism that's going on in the immune system. We ground a human body. When you ground your body to the earth, you're conductively, meaning barefoot on the earth, hands on the earth, whatever, but you're in skin contact with the earth. Then your body, and the earth has what we call a negative surface charge and an electrical surface charge. It's like lightning is an example of it. So if you go put your barefoot on the earth, then your body's going to absorb those free electrons that live on the surface of the earth. Everything electrical is grounded to the earth. Electrons can flow in you have a ground rod, the wire on it connecting to the electric. So electrons can go into the earth, or they can borrow electrons from the earth in order to maintain the electrical stability of the system and prevent fire. So anyhow, the one day I was just in the same time frame, I was reading that Time magazine article, the study behind the Time magazine article, and I recognized that the immune system produces, if you have a pathogen in your body, and you get pathogen every breath you take, out your food, everything there's pathogens all the time. But you have an immune system, the immune system gets you through all of this. But when the immune system isn't functioning, this is the mechanism here. So I learned that if there's a pathogen sitting here, there's a neutrophil, a white blood cell. The immune system will send this white blood cell. It'll swim over and it wraps itself around the pathogen. And then it releases what we call reactive oxygen species. The word reactive means it can rip chrome off of a bumper. It's an electrical charge. So that's how the immune system functions. The immune system uses radicals to strip electrons from the shell of a pathogen and destroy it. That's how the immune systems work from the beginning of time. And all humans, animals, and plants were grounded throughout from the beginning of time until these very modern times. So anyhow, I said, okay, when we ground the body and the pain stops, the inflammation stops, then what we're doing is the body absorbs all of these electrons and it's measurable on the body. You become negative and you equalize with the earth. So you have the same amount of antioxidants, primal antioxidants, free electrons as the earth itself does, and you absorb them. So now you are grounded, just like grounding a computer or an electronic device or anything else connected to the earth. Earth's electrons come up and the shell or the housing of that device, like a refrigerator or anything else, it goes to earth potential. So now, it's for electrical safety. So, but anyhow, in putting this all together, I need to draw a little picture of this rather than try to explain it sometimes. But so I recognize that if we're just pouring electrons into the body's absorbing electrons, the body's becoming negative. Charge can't exist in a negative environment. So when you ground the body, your body is flooded with free electrons. And the blood, for instance, red blood cells, there's a study on the earthinginstitute.net. Red blood cells, as soon as you ground the body to the earth, they absorb these free electrons, and you increase the negative surface charge, or the amount of free electrons on the surface of red blood cells, by 270%. That's a published study on PubMed or at the Earthing Institute. So now, because the red blood cells are more negative, like little magnets, they're more negatively charged. You increase the negative charge. Now they begin to repel each other like little negative magnets. You push them together and they push each other apart. So now the human blood is more negative. So now it repels. The cells repel each other. Where before you have thick, sticky blood, now you have very thin blood, like the animals in nature. And now the blood can get in and out of the capillaries, oxygenates tissue, drop off electrons wherever there's any radicals remaining, whatever, and return the body to its most natural state, which is connected to the earth, electrically, one with the earth. I don't know if I went too far on that or not.
No, I'm fascinated. Yeah, no, I'm listening from my, it makes perfect sense. It really does. I always, the term we used, and I heard from somewhere, the wisdom of the body knows exactly what to do. We just got to get out of the way to allow it to come back to that. And then the rest starts to take care of itself.
Yeah. On some of my podcasts lately, I've been bringing this up. I was doing some research some anthropologists and so on looking at when arthritis and stuff started to develop. But I recognize that the first Homo sapien, about 150,000 years old, that's when Homo sapiens, as far as the records go. And so anyhow, I started thinking about that. I'm alive today because 10,000 approximately. I have 10,000 grandmothers, all of their genes in a row that have gotten me here. And what I want to know is what got them here, because they didn't have all the meds. They didn't have all the docs. They didn't have all of these things that we have. And the average age of a lot of them was same age as we are today, unless they were, war, famine, those kind of things, but primarily war and famine, controlled population growth and so on. But anyhow, there's something in our genes. Every one of us, we have 10,000 grandmothers, and their genes reside in all of us. Some of us individually and some of us, as groups. But so you have to go back and think. The human immune system, the human body, knows everything. And we come along and we insulate ourselves from the earth. We lose all of our natural immunity. And then all of a sudden our bodies are on fire and we run around trying to put the fire out, because otherwise you're going to get lupus, MS, cardiovascular disease, cancer, all these things. And to put that in perspective, animals who live in the wild, cancer doesn't manifest in the wild. By and large, it does not manifest. If we contaminate their environment and so on, it will. But in the normal scheme of things, cancer does not exist in the wild population. However, animals who live indoors with their owners, 50% of them will die from cancer, just like their owners. So that's a reference to suggest that this is an environmental health challenge. And what the challenge is we lost our ground. We need to restore. Because in our work, what we tried to do was tie all this together, but more so than anything else, is prove you can't have inflammation in a grounded body. And you cannot.
Wow. What about because the way I've always looked at it, like with inflammation, is like I look at all my lifestyle factors, lack of movement, I don't eat sugar, processed food. I've cut out, hydrogenated vegetable oils, things like that I know just scream inflammation, which then of course downstream causes a manifestation into symptoms and things like that. And listen to you speak about, because it's like you're going directly to the inflammatory response then, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
have you done, yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, like, how much would we be looking at all factors to support the grounding aspects? Because I ground. I don't wear shoes. I've created a lifestyle for myself where I live by the beach. Right. When I sleep at night, I'm, in that fortunate position, and I can feel the difference instantly when I am and I aren't. You tune in, you really do.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I've thousands of people have asked me, well, what about this? What about that? Whatever, and all of these things that create inflammation in the body. And I says, you do not know for sure that, what is the true cause of inflammation is because you do not have enough redox potential. You do not have enough free electrons from, primal free electrons in your body to manage the remaining remnants of an oxidative burst. And those little radicals, they're only going to be alive for nanoseconds. So every time you eat eat something or produce a radical, and metabolic process, there's lots of radicals being produced in the body at all time. Breathing air is one of the, but as long as you have your body is negative, meaning it has an abundance of free electrons like it did throughout all time, then you can't have inflammation. You have to insulate yourself from the earth, because otherwise your body is conducting Earth's energy, and that negative energy won't let oxidation occur. So what it does is it donates these free electrons, reduce these radicals at the speed of light. Now, it's like a lot of people say, you mean I can stop the pain instantly? No, I said, first of all, you ground yourself. That stops the inflammation because now your body's being flooded with free electrons. And as the electrons, your blood circulates once a minute. As your blood circulates, then after a few minutes, then you'll find the pain starts to come way down. And the respiration comes and everything, your skin turns pink and, goes on and on and on. But the inflammation stopped the moment you got grounded because you were absorbing free electrons. You get ungrounded. Now, if you have enough stored charge in your body, you can go for a period of time because your body is like a capacitor. Blood is capacitive. It will hold charge until you breathe enough oxygen and run it off. So it's dynamic. But anyhow, so to me, it's like I remember all the EMFers when I first started grounding, and all the EMFers just went crazy. They said, "Oh no, this is all nuts. You ground yourself to the earth. The EMFs are going to be sucked through your body. They're going to give you a heart attack, and you're going to die." Well, these people are absolutely brainless. Your body is an antenna if you are not grounded. The only way you can attract an EMF to your body is when you are ungrounded.
Ungrounded.
Yeah. If you ground it, that's not possible because, and put it in sense, the earth is infinitely large, body is infinitely small. You put them together and they equalize. Okay. End of story. EMFs are being, whatever. But the same with static electricity or anything else. You ground yourself, static electricity evaporates. But anyhow, everybody said, and then it came along, then it was high fructose sugar. Well, high fructose sugar didn't come along until the mid 70s come out. And yet diabetes started in the early 50s, or in the mid 50s when it started to show up big time. And then all these other, like autism and lupus and MS, these weren't because of high fructose sugar, but that's what everybody was claiming. And then it was this and then it was that. But they've had 100 things that are the cause of MS, that are the cause of this. The people advertising this or that. But I always go back to one thing, and this is because I grew up on a ranch, Health is, it's like when I was a kid, I was a cowboy. That's a boy who sits on a horse and rides the pasture and checks the water and looks at the cattle. And if you see one that's not acting like the rest, you take them out of the herd and put them in a holding pen. Then you go ride the pasture and you look at the grass, make sure it's not too short, make sure the weeds aren't coming up, because something in the pasture contributed to that cow's poor health. Because health is natural. Health is natural if you keep the cat pasture pristine. So, but anyhow, out of all of that, I learned that, otherwise, if the cattle get sick, then you have to call the vet. The vet takes all the money. The banker takes over and you're done. And it's like today, if people were, I shouldn't say that. I'll get in trouble. You can't afford the vet bill. I guess at the point you can't afford the vet bill, and that's where we are today. And everybody's, but anyhow, but I've always had that instinct of health is natural. Health is the body's most natural state. If you do not have health, then something in the environment is interfering with the immune system's ability to maintain health. Because for billions of years, this immune system that we all have evolved, developed, and it only had one purpose: to preserve and restore health. So anyhow, I don't buy I don't think that any foods that have been processed are good for you. I don't believe that for a second. I don't think preservatives, even though we need them, because we have so many masses of people that we have to distribute and feed. And the world's different than when I was a kid. Every day we would go collect the eggs. We would, whatever it is, we ate off the land, but today, when I was turn 18 or something and you go to the city and you start eating that stuff and you see, the milk is pasteurized and it's not sweet anymore. The eggs are, white or, not orange. They used to be orange. Now they're yellow. And, and it goes on and on. And so, but yeah, I think you need to eat good food, unadulterated food. I think that's primary. And because anything you do that is unnatural, it's challenging your immune system. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to stress your immune system any more than we already stress it because of our living environments. So
modern life, right? Yeah.
It's not one thing. It's a lifestyle, and it's a choice. Everything's a choice. You make these choices. And the older you get, the more you wise up and realize some of the choices of the past weren't very good. And now you pay for them when you get older. And, but anyhow, I'm not sure where I'm going with all of this.
That's okay. I got a couple of questions for you before we wrap up the podcast, Clint. So is there like I know every single individual is different with every circumstance and lifestyle, but have you found like there's a minimum effective dose of grounding on a daily basis that can get it over the line per se?
Well, like I tell everybody, that's a question comes up every time.
Does it?
And somebody, go and say, well, I touched a tree the other day and touched the leaf and it was grounding, wasn't it? And I said, yes, it was probably. But I said, the best way to know when you need to be grounded or how long you need to be grounded is if you have any pain in your body, because you cannot have pain in your body unless you have inflammation first. So if you ground and then the pain stops, then then you put out the fire. Now, if the fire comes back quickly, you need more grounding. But it's really an age thing. But not really as much as I used to think, because now diabetes, 40% of the children can be diagnosed with some level of diabetes. Mm-hmm. And, all of these health disorders that our children are having. I used to think that younger people could handle this better, but they can't, because younger people never get grounded. They put on tennis shoes in the morning, run all day, do it, and they never touch the earth ever. But look at all their health disorders, ADD, ADHD, just chronic health disorder and really taxing the whole system. But so grounding, first of all, everybody needs to go out and spend some time grounded and understand that it's real for you, that it does affect your blood, does affect your heart rate, does affect everything, your demeanor, your everything, your energy. You have more energy when you're grounded. And you need to experiment with it. But beyond that, any amount of grounding is good. More is better. But if you don't want to have to worry about these inflammation-related health disorders, you have to spend more time grounded than not.
Yeah.
And however you do that, your choice. There's multitudes of ways to do it.
You can work it out. Yeah, the first place when I sort of really started thinking about this was my bed. Like, let's ground the bed, because that's where I sleep. That's where all my restorative and repair goes on. And,
exactly. Yeah. I think that's the most important. In fact, when we were doing our studies, all the study participants wanted the mats, or they wanted this and whatever. And we weren't in the business of it. We were just doing studies, but they wanted one for their mom. They wanted one for somebody. And so we ended up starting to make these things and just for the subjects and the study people. And then all of a sudden there was a demand. Everybody, woman gets grounded, and the first thing she wants to do is ground her mother, or vice versa, and so on. So we accidentally ended up with this business. But anyhow, when we were saying one day that, we need to provide something so everybody can get grounded, but it's got to be affordable. It's got to be simple. And most of all, it has to work. If it doesn't work, because we have studies that say these things occur. Well, if you don't buy a decent grounding product, that way may not happen. If you buy cotton with silver in it and stuff, your sweat will oxidize the silver and couple of months later, it won't be working. And then you're saying, well, grounding doesn't work. It's not grounding. It's the technique. But anyhow, so the carbon mats is what we designed because they will last 5-10 years and they're relatively inexpensive and you can wipe them down. And carbon is a natural, antibacterial. And where other things really build up smell and, all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, the main thing is they work because we did all of our studies using those products. And we spent lots of time, lots of money experimenting with finding creature comforts, trying to duplicate the creature comforts of an existing sheet or an existing whatever. It's practically impossible. And then they don't work. So we just said we're going to give people what they need in order to recover and maintain their health. All the other guys out there, there's hundreds of them knocking off earthing and grounding products, but they're just trying to make, rip off a buck here and there, by attacking the way everything is on the internet. Anybody can steal anything. It's crazy out there. But anyhow, the point is more is better. But if you have pain, for sure, that's a fire signal from your immune system. Or from the nervous system. My body's on fire. Get me out of here. Put the fire out.
Wow. That's a powerful message to tie up the podcast, Clint. One last question for you, mate. I've really loved our conversation today. It's been
cool.
Fascinating, your journey and the way you shared it. I really appreciate it. One last question. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Well, yeah, when I was first started this work 25 years ago, I think autism was like 1 in 10,000 or something like that. MS, lupus, these are all like 1 in 10,000, whatever. Very rare health disorders. Today, autism is 1 in 60. Lupus, MS, fibromyalgia, all of these health disorders, cancer, all of these things are growing exponentially. We have the best facilities for medical, and we have good food. You can have good food. You have to work at it, find it, and get it. But anyhow, so we really do have to ask ourselves, well, when are we going to stop and focus on our children? Because if we let the next generation, if we let this autism go any further than it has, if we let diabetes and all of these chronic health disorders that are showing up in children, if we don't put a stop to it, then you might as well go out and have a big party, get your fiddle out like, in Rome and dance until it's over. Because right now, we're hell bent on, all of the material world and all the fun and the glitz and the whatever. But there's a balance in here. Now it's time to stop and back up a little bit. But most of all the older people, don't worry about them. They're going to be grounded soon enough. But the youngsters, we do have to take care of the young people and the young moms. 90% of our customers are, over 99% of our customers are women, 30 years old to 60 years old. They're taking care of their moms, their daughters, and vice versa. And then they go in and they're the caregivers of the family. They take care of the family. But it's these young moms that we have to get behind, because if they lose their health, if they lose their ability to function, then it destroys the family. We end up with divorces, children without the parents. It's endless. Everybody knows the story. But we got to stop. We have to slow down. We have to stop. I don't have the answers. I just know we got problems and we have solutions. And I love earthing because it's free. It's a free solution. If you can't do anything else, you can go outdoors, take your shoes off, put your feet on the earth, and stay there until the pain stops. It's free.
Yeah, beautiful. I keep thinking of what you said at the beginning of the podcast. I stopped being a consumer and became a contributor.
Yeah.
I was like, that's powerful.
Yeah. That's what we all have, especially the last half of your life. You don't have anything else that's worthy of doing.
Exactly, totally, and it's the most rewarding thing ever. I'll make sure links are in the show notes. But if people want to find out more, Clint, where can we send them to?
Well, earthinginstitute.net has all the studies. There's probably 30, 40 peer-reviewed studies there. You can also find them on PubMed. And any questions or anything, go there. The earthing products are readily available at earthing.com. The earthing movie is free on YouTube. It's got, 15, 20 million views now. And it kind of tells the whole story about what we did. It's very authentic. It has a lot of high profiles in it. And it's been I'm a blessed person because I get to help with and participate in all this. It's just fun. Every day you wake up, you got something to do, and you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Clint. Appreciate everything. And thanks for exploring your passion.
All right. Cool. All right.
Thanks,
we'll see
Legend.
you. Do keep in touch.
Thank you.